Okay, I think we're gonna go ahead and get started. Welcome, students, candidates, everyone else to the second debate of tonight. Tonight we have our candidates for Executive VP and going over some ground rules. Each candidate is gonna get a minute to for their opening statements to respond to each question and for their closing statements. And each candidate will get 30 seconds for rebuttals to each question. And for the chat, for all of our audience, put your questions in there and we'll have those asked at the end, just so it's not distracting to the candidates while they respond to the questions during the debate. Yeah, should we go ahead and get started with opening statements? Cole, do you want to go ahead and start us off?
Yes. Hello, everyone. First and foremost, I would like to start by thanking all of you for streaming in today, the Daily Aztec for hosting and organizing these debates, and my opponent for coming to discuss these pressing topics. My name is Cole Wallenstein, and I'm running to be your Executive Vice President. As someone who is uplifted by my communities during struggles with mental health, I deeply believe in the importance of building communities. Given my experience representing communities inside and outside of Associated students, I understand the challenges and limitations that form barriers to us becoming a unified SDSU. I have been involved in Associated Students since my first semester at State, so nearly 3 years now. Ever since I went to my first AS meeting, a passion for helping other students and making SDSU as a whole a more welcoming environment has been ignited in me. I decided to run for Executive Vice President because although AS has been my home since day one, I recognize that other individuals see their communities in that same light. Recognizing the disconnect between these communities to bring them together and create a shared experience among them is my goal. I have had experience stepping into spaces to represent the student voices in areas that traditionally had none. I've worked with Aaron Brown on the Alcohol and Other Drugs Task Force, representing the Interfraternity Council and Aztec Student Union Board. I also have experience stepping into design meetings with McCarthy and Smith Group regarding the ARC expansion and being the only student in the room, giving me the necessary experience to further advocate the student voice during projects such as the Mission Valley expansion. As your Executive Vice President, I will utilize events such as Homecoming as an opportunity to amplify SDSU pride, work with the various identity and cultural centers on campus to create an inclusive mental health campaign, and further my work prioritizing student needs in the ARC and Mission Valley expansion, ultimately creating platforms for the student voice in spaces we are silenced to create real and inclusive change.
Okay, thank you. Karina, your opening statement.
All right, thank you. I would first like to thank the Daily Aztec for hosting this event today. I'd also like to thank everyone tuning in today, as well as my opponent for being here. My name is Karina Esteban, and I am running to be your AS Executive Vice President. The role of AS Executive Vice President pertains to campus life and campus issues. One of the biggest issues we have on campus right now is mental health. As someone who has personally struggled with mental health, I understand the importance of accessibility and awareness to mental health resources. The time within COVID-19 has brought up many mental health issues across the student body, which is why I'm here today to ensure further accessibility to these resources. I'm also here today because as a woman of color, I haven't seen many other students that look like me up in high leadership positions. I want to take this step to inspire other women, especially women of color, to apply and run for leadership positions and show them that they are qualified and that they deserve a seat at the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move forward with the first question. Caitlin.
All right. At this time last year, we were conducting these debates in an empty student union theater. This year, we're on Zoom. For the past 12 months, students have been tuning in to classes online, and their connection to campus is almost entirely virtual. Why is it important for students to tune in and participate in the Associated Students elections? We'll start off with Karina.
Thank you for the question. Being connected to campus is so important, and this really creates a part of our SDSU culture. Personally, I find a lot of my connection through athletics event, being involved, as well as connecting with other students, and being a part of this event is so important because we are able to understand what issues we are dealing with as students and bring them to Associated Students to be able to discuss them and be able to find a solution to them so we are able to be more successful during our time here. Thank you.
Thank you. Cole, you can respond.
No, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant the original question, not as a debate response. My bad.
Oh, sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, definitely. So at this time last year, we were conducting these debates in an empty student union theater, and this year we are on Zoom. For the past 12 months, students have been tuning into classes online, and their connection to campus is almost entirely virtual. Why is it important for students to tune in and participate in the Associated Students elections?
Thank you for the question. Over the last few years, we have seen an overall decline in student voter turnout. For example, last year, less than 10% of students voted. But now more than ever is the time for students to get involved. It is important for students to tune into debates, as not every student has the time to become involved in AS themselves and voice their opinion directly to administration. Therefore, debates is a chance for students to learn our goals and values, so when they get out and vote, they elect leaders who they believe will not only advocate for their wants and needs, but have the consistency of creating meaningful change.
Thank you. Would any of the candidates like to rebuttal or respond?
No, thank you.
Okay, so moving forward, one of the largest issues that students at SDSU deal with, obviously, is the cost of tuition and housing. How would you ensure that future housing plans on campus have the students' best interest in mind when it comes down to the price and the safety during the transition back to in-person instruction? Cole, you can go ahead and respond first.
Absolutely. So when considering the cost of tuition and also considering the cost of housing, both critical needs that students need to be able to support financially in order to gain a valuable education from the university, it's really important to consider that I'm able to work with our Vice President of Finance, Abigail Tamayo, in order to ensure that they are able to be provided the correct financial resources, and also working with different places on campus, such as the ECRT, so the Economic Crisis Response Team, as they're able to help provide immediate housing assistance if there's a student that encountered a crisis, say they lost a job or different things like that, in which that they were able to basically no longer be able to afford rent, that they can get that immediate assistance. But more importantly, in my position as Executive Vice President, I would be able to tie in and making sure that they have the correct mental health support throughout this process. So a student can't have proper mental health if they're worried about basically where they're going to get their next meal from, or where they're going to be spending the night, or different things like that. So ensuring that we're able to create mental health campaigns that support them with their mental health.
Okay, thank you. And Karina, your response to the question?
Would you be able to repeat the question, please?
Yeah, of course. So obviously one of the largest issues that students at SDSU face is tuition, the cost, and housing affordability. How would you ensure that future housing plans on campus have the students' best interest in mind when it comes down to the price and the safety in terms of the transition back to in-person?
Thank you. I know something we've had on campus is the economic responses crisis team, where we've been able to fundraise money through Aztec Strong Hunger to be able to support these students through their issues. But as well as the economic crisis response team, we also have a CARES network, which is the campus assistance, response, and engagement and support. So this is a unit through student affairs and campus diversity, where anyone can submit a referral, maybe a concern about another student's well-being, whether it be academic, personal, emotional, or financial assistance. So they'll be able to receive resources and funding and referrals to help with any of their basic needs. This has been through counseling and psychological services, through financial aid and scholarships, the Center for Student Rights and Responsibilities, as well as the Wellbeing and Promotion, to be able to provide housing for these students.
Okay, great. And do any of the candidates want to respond or rebut one another? Okay, moving forward.
Okay. SDSU has had some of the highest numbers of COVID-19 cases among all universities in California. Why do you think this happened over the past year, and how would you address the ongoing parties students continue to have during the pandemic? we're starting with Karina this time, I believe.
All right, thank you. Well, to begin, I would say that the university failed to initiate proper policy for these students who were coming back to campus. As well as moving forward, I would really want to ensure accessibility for vaccinations for students to be able to come back in a safe environment. And through the role of executive vice president, I would really ensure intentional programming to give students a safe way to be on campus and to be able to connect with other students and still feel that sense of community and get the most out of their experience here through a safe environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Cole?
You mind repeating the question real quick?
Sure. Question is, SDSU has had some of the highest numbers of COVID-19 cases among all universities in California. Why do you think this happened over the past year? And how would you address the ongoing parties students continue to have during the pandemic?
So I think one of the ongoing issues that happened is when students returned to campus, specifically university housing, there was no COVID testing protocol that was immediately in place. They allowed them to return to campus and move into dorms, apartments, and different university housing without prior testing, which definitely contributed to the initial spike of COVID cases on campus. And in terms of Greek life, I think it's really important to consider that accountability is a two-way street. And so ensuring that not only are we working with fraternity and sorority life, and then additionally working with the Interfraternity Council and the College Panhellenic Association to ensure that there's a continuation of basically safety protocols and standards that are set in place to ensure that parties aren't going on. I know initially the Interfraternity Council had a self-imposed social moratorium, which placed a ban on all in-person activities, including but not limited to parties. So ensuring that not only are these rules being put in place, but also that they're enforced.
Thank you. Would any of the candidates like to respond to each other?
No, thank you.
Okay, moving forward. So a majority of both of you guys' slate is in a Greek organization. How would you ensure the voices of those outside of Greek life are still heard? Cole, we'll start with you.
Although I am a member of the Greek community and have served as an Interfraternity Council executive, my goal as executive vice president of Associated Students is to represent all students. And yes, although there will be a representation from Greek organizations present at the table when it comes to my year-long mental health campaign, it is important to note that they will not be the only voice at the table. For my year-long mental health initiative, I will personally reach out to various communities to ensure that I have representatives from all over campus on this committee, including representatives from every cultural and identity center to ensure that my campaign goes about addressing mental health through multiple lenses and not just a one-size-fits-all method, as every single individual and community is affected differently.
Okay, thank you. And Karina, your response to the question?
Thank you. Although a majority of my Greek life self are members of the Greek community, myself being in my sorority as well as current Panhellenic Executive Board, my identity is so much more than my membership in my Greek life chapters and roles. I would say that as a woman of color, with my Latinx identity, I've been able to find a home, collaborate in the Latinx Student Union, and use my experiences to really inspire others to go for these leadership positions, as well as my involvements outside of Greek life within philanthropic initiatives of Dance Marathon and Asterix Rock Hunger, where I was both on these leadership teams, where I was advocating for other students and raising money for fun. And really making sure that I was doing work outside of Greek life as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And would either of the candidates like to respond to one another?
Can I rebuttal?
Yeah, you have 30 seconds. Go ahead.
I would just like to highlight that my involvements in leadership have been well outside of Greek life and well outside of Associated Students. Although I've sat on various councils, committees, and commissions for AS. Outside of that, I've also been involved in different organizations such as Campus Outreach and Greek InterVarsity, which is specifically a Christian ministry that is within the Greek community, but different organizations like that have led me to gain a wider lens on different issues that affect our campus. So ensuring that basically I'm not approaching this from only the Greek community, but also ensuring that I'm approaching this from just the general student.
Okay, thank you. Moving forward.
Okay. Mental health initiatives have become a staple in associated students as campus communities navigate a new learning environment and live through historical events like the Black Lives Matter movement and the Capitol insurrection. How would you work to continue these initiatives as students return to campus in the fall? Karina, you can start.
Thank you for the question. I do want to begin by saying that I do not support any of these hateful crimes at all. And I would also like to say that moving forward to ensure that things like these aren't happening again, I want to bring students to the table from those communities to ask what their needs are and how we can better support them as associated students. I would be lying if I say I knew the answer in the perspective of every student, but it's about getting the people from those communities into the room to have a conversation about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Cole?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. Mental health initiatives have become a staple in associated students as campus communities navigate new learning environments and live through historical events like the Black Lives Matter movement and the Capitol insurrection. How would you work to continue these initiatives as students return to campus in the fall?
Absolutely. So I think that both of those incidents that you mentioned are absolutely unacceptable and have absolutely no place on our campus here. And those should be condemned. It should never be something that anything like that should never happen on our campus. And the mental and physical well-being of students must come first. Students are struggling with mental health, and making mental health the first priority will be a crucial step to ensuring a strong foundation for our return to in-person activities and the reintegration of campus. And so taking different initiatives such as creating a year-long campaign to address mental health in not only one lens, but ensuring that we're addressing mental health in a way that is considerate of every cultural and identity center, and working with them to ensure that they're brought into the conversations and they have representatives to make sure that we can have a holistic approach to mental health is going to be really important.
Thank you. Would any of the candidates like to respond?
No, thank you.
Okay, so obviously the decision by the University Senate to replace the traditional spring break with separate rest and recovery days was controversial, to say the least. How will you use your position to strongly advocate on behalf of students so that their voices are heard? Let's see, let's go Cole respond first. I forgot the order for a second.
Yeah. Although I understand that the university made the decision to remove spring break from a public health standpoint, that does not at all mean that I agree with it. Rest and recovery days are not an acceptable substitution for the traditional one-week spring break. The traditional spring break was a time for recovery and healing from the high stress and pressures of a semester that has been filled with hardship. A full week off would have been a recovery window for students. To say that giving students 1 or 2 days off in a week throughout the semester would offer the same level of recovery is just wrong. Coming back in the fall, we need to ensure that student voice is held at the same level as administration to prioritize the needs of students and make students' mental health the first priority. It is time for the administration to step up and listen to the voice of the nearly 400 students who attempted to voice their opposition to the University Senate in the initial meeting where the decision was made behind closed doors. Coming back in the fall as executive vice president, I will immediately amplify the student voices by reaching out to different communities across campus, such as RSOs and all of the cultural and identity centers within the first month of school. Together, we will collaborate to create a year-long mental health campaign to ensure the student voice on mental health is the #1 priority when we return to campus.
Thank you, Cole. Karina, your response to the question?
Thank you. I would make sure to work with my chief of staff to appoint other students to smaller committees within the University Senate, because it's not okay that only AS is allowed to participate in shared governance. We need to prioritize infiltrating other students into the University Senate through smaller committees. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any of the candidates want to respond to each other on the topic?
Okay. With all the different resource centers being implemented on campus, how do you plan to continue to listen to the different student voices and keep diversity a priority? Karina, you can respond first.
Thank you. I would say that as a woman of color in a lot of the spaces, I don't traditionally see other people who look like me. Joining the Panhellenic community, this was something that really inspired me to join the Panhellenic board. I wanted to really inspire other people, especially people of color, and really bring that diversity aspect into these leadership roles. Moving forward, I really want to make sure that we're having intentional conversations with everyone else, really asking how we can bring them to the table as well. I know that as far as other diversity through campus, in my role as Panhellenic, on the Panhellenic Executive Board, I have collaborated with the Black Resource Center during Black History Month, and really making sure that I'm asking them, like, how can we show your information in the best way, and that we are bringing those diversity aspects into spaces that do not traditionally make that a priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Cole?
For my year-long mental health initiative, I will personally reach out to various communities to ensure that I have representation from all over campus on this committee, including representatives from every cultural and identity center, to ensure that my campaign goes about addressing mental health through multiple lenses and not just a one-size-fits-all method, as every single individual and community is affected differently. And I think one thing that is additionally important that could be contributed to this is making sure that in projects such as the Mission Valley expansion, that these spaces, like the identity and the cultural centers that we see on the current main campus that came about as an afterthought in the Mission Valley project, aren't an afterthought, making sure that they're in the plans from the beginning, and that those identity centers and cultural centers are already existing on that campus before it even opens.
Thank you. Would any of the candidates like to respond to each other?
Yes, please.
Go ahead, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. I would like to further elaborate on my point by meeting with the director of the Identity Centers, Jessica Nair, because it's not important to only talk to students, but to push administration to do better by students at much a higher level. My opponent mentioned the Mission Valley expansion, which will be finished in 2030, but I want to focus on here, and I want to focus on now, because the Mission Valley campus is over a decade away. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're ready.
Okay,
Can I add something?
yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to add one example of how I've taken action to help underrepresented communities on this campus, on the main campus, is that as the Commissioner of Recreation and Wellness, I helped facilitate the transition of SCSU adaptive athletics to be housed in associated students, therefore ensuring that the program will have access to facilities, funding, support services, and program awareness. And not only that, but making SCSU one of only 16 universities nationwide to offer a competitive adaptive athletics program.
Okay, thank you. Moving forward, how do you both plan to make yourself accessible to students in your role as Executive VP? Cole, go ahead, you will respond first.
Sorry, my mouse was giving me a little bit of trouble. So to make myself more accessible to students, I plan on making myself directly accessible to them by hosting weekly office hours in which we can discuss topics such as the Mission Valley expansion, ARC expansion, homecoming, the mental health initiative, and discuss other opportunities for collaborative events. I also want to further the student mixers to allow AS leaders to connect and collaborate with other leaders outside of AS, such as other RSOs and the cultural and identity centers, and forming personal connections with leaders and students from all areas of campus, including the cultural and identity centers that I mentioned, by ensuring them seats on the committees, such as the one that I plan to form for my year-long mental health campaign.
Okay, thank you, Karina.
Thank you. So my president, Ashley Tejada, wants to prioritize a presidential advisory committee to place students from athletics. And so identity centers as well. So I will be serving as her vice president on that. Another thing that has happened is a student mixer, which is a temporarily fix to establish morale, but I want to work on advocacy and a sustainable method of updated information. Furthermore, through my past experiences across not only internal AS roles, but across campus through Greek life, philanthropy, my identity in the Latinx community, as well as Dance Marathon, I understand campus life and have been going out to students in various ways, and I'm able to bring a holistic perspective, not just from internal AS. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do any of the candidates want to respond to one another? Okay.
Okay. Next question. If elected, what would your top 3 priorities be? Karina, you can start.
Thank you for the question. As Chief Operating Officer, I will stress the urgency behind further accessibility to mental health resources. Throughout the past year, students, including myself, have felt so much disconnect, which has truly affected mental health. Taking care of our mental health is the foundation to be accessible to be successful as students in other areas of our life, which is why I want to stress accessibility through intentional programming and providing resources. I also want to re-invoke campus pride within athletics, an effort to create a tighter-knit SDSU community. Athletics are something that bring us all together, whether you're on the field, showing up to a tailgate, or being in the stands with your friends and family. Athletics play a huge role in bringing our SDSU community together. I also want to bring AS programming to athletic events to bridge the gap between athletics and AS, who have been neglected in the past. And finally, as Executive Vice President, I want to restructure the culture behind AS leader programming and training and ensure members serve the SDSU community to the fullest extent that they can, and the expectations for student leaders are much higher. Thank you.
Thank you. Cole?
There is a need for connection, social interaction, and community building. A primary goal of mine will be focusing on the transition back to in-person activities. Currently, RSOs can plan and host one event up to 100 people outdoors. However, we don't know exactly what the fall is going to look like. However, I have the experience as a Rec and Wellness Commissioner of dealing with the university telling Aztec Recreation to close and reopen our facilities at moment's notice. For example, the ARC indoors. Coming back onto campus this fall, I will work with the administration in San Diego County Health and Human Services to ensure that if in-person instruction is available, so is in-person activities in campus life, as having social interaction and the ability to build communities in person should hold the same high level of importance. Like I said before, I understand the importance of building community. And when I think of a time where students, faculty, staff, and alumni were united, it all comes back to our shared pride in our athletics programs. Right now, everyone at State is taking pride in the fact that our men's basketball team just won the Mountain West Tournament championships. I want unification in our fall homecoming and use it as an opportunity to amplify SDSU pride through bringing together various campus communities as one. However, my top priority is to ensure the mental and physical well-being of students come first. Students are struggling with mental health. As Executive Vice President, I will ensure that mental health is not a topic that is addressed only 1 week out of the year, but rather an ongoing conversation to be addressed throughout the entire year. But before we focus on the social aspects of campus life and campus pride, we must acknowledge that mental and physical well-being of students must come first. Because in order for everything I just mentioned to happen and for unification and pride to take place, we need a strong foundation to build upon. There cannot be peak pride or peak campus pride when students are struggling with mental health. Making mental health the first priority in order to ensure a strong foundation will help to ensure an area and mindset to be happy and prideful in our campus community. Through my experience running Mental Health Week, I realized that every community is affected differently. There is no one-size-fits-all solution to mental health. This is an issue that requires a dynamic response. And while AS did put on this event, but it's realizing that while trying to address mental health, there are different views and standards that come about with mental health from different cultures and communities. It is so different and dynamic for every single individual. Making a movement like Rock the Vote or Aztecs Rock Hunger is going to be what my campaign will be kind of structured around. Although everyone may address mental health differently, it is an issue that everyone faces. Every community, especially in this pandemic, does not have the same access, and there are equity gaps among communities. And as your executive vice president this fall, I will create a campaign that addresses more than just one lens and not just a one-size-fits-all method that helps to close those existing equity gaps.
Okay, thank you. Karina, would you like to respond? Would any of the candidates like to respond?
Yes, please. I'd like to elaborate on my point.
Okay, go ahead.
Students are tired of feeling detached. We need to create new ways and not be complicit with the incredibly narrow opportunities that have been released for, or opportunities that have been presented by student life and leadership in the past. One of these ways is working with athletics for distant tailgates ideas for sports alongside just basketball, like recognizing soccer and baseball and lacrosse and other sports that traditionally not have been as recognized. And so really bringing together all of our sports and not letting anyone else go unrecognized. Through my experience as a campus safety chair, I have learned that every student has a different comfortability and level throughout each avenue. So therefore, I think it's important to think outside the box to make sure that everyone is being participating and recognized. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more responses? Okay.
Since we have a little bit extra time this time, I want to do a follow-up question before we move on to our last question and closing statements. So both of you have highly prioritized athletics. What about the other aspects of campus life in terms of theater, music, all of those other, Aztec Music Group, just, to name a few? How will you guys prioritize that in the transition back? Cole, we'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think this is where my previous experience as the Aztec Student Union Board representative would come into play. So I have experience hosting events of all sorts of different levels and different topics, is where, for example, we've had subcommittees such as the Cultural Arts and Film, and then we've also had student diversity and different committees like that and subcommittees where we've had experience not only hosting events, collaborating with athletics, but also trying to reach to as many different areas and departments of SUSU as we possibly can. And so being able to take that experience and turn it around and keep using it and continue building on that is going to be really, really important in order to make sure that we can reach out to as many different areas of campus as we can.
Okay, great, thank you. Karina, your response?
Thank you. So as the current campus community representative with NAS, I've been able to see many different parts of campus and see where students are lacking. So I would say that theater is facing a huge equity gap right now on campus where they're not able to be successful through their education, whereas many athletics events have been able to, but I would say the equity gap within theater is really through programming. So they aren't even able to have hybrid practices, whereas athletics have been able to. So I really want to ensure that they are able to be successful through their education in in-person courses as well. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Would any of you like to respond to each other on that topic?
Can I add something?
Go ahead, we have 30 seconds.
I wanted to add basically that we have the opportunity as associated students. We own multiple facilities on campus, such as the open air theater and additionally Viejas Arena. So we could look into different avenues, such as offering those venues to departments like theater to be able to perform larger events and even make adaptive events. So say, for instance, in COVID, you can't pack 300 people into a small theater right now. So if they wanted to be able to perform performances and put on different theater events throughout COVID, and if we were able to offer them, say, for instance, the Cal Coast Open Air Theater, where they could host an event with many people and enforce that social distancing by having that extra space, I think that would be a great opportunity to start reaching out to different departments, like you mentioned, such as theater.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's move on to the last question, and then we'll open it up to participant questions.
Would you like me to read the last question, Caitlin?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, number 12, right? Okay. Do you agree with how the university handled the coronavirus pandemic? Would you have had a different approach? Karina, you can start.
Thank you for the question. I would say that first off, the communication was terrible. Students didn't really know what was happening at all, which was not okay. They were lost and confused on what was happening with their own education, especially for students coming to this school for the first time. This was the experience that they had here. Even up until signing leases, students didn't know whether they should be on campus, whether they should be moving home. And I would say the next thing is the policy. Students were solely blamed for the parties, a lot to do at this time, but I think that the university could have handled this differently by giving students more opportunities to do safer things and safer environments, and it had a lot to do with protocol. So students should be tested more often, and we should really be pushing for further accessibility to resources as well. I think another issue of this was spring break being canceled. This was really unfair for students, as many of us use this time as a break to focus on our mental health. And these 3 weekends were just not really helpful for students because we were still doing homework. We were still studying for exams the next day versus taking that entire week to really focus on our mental health and come back re-energized to be successful in the rest of the semester. Thank you.
Thank you. Cole?
Yeah, I think the university has attempted to do its best job that it could in responding to the coronavirus pandemic. However, I think there's definitely a lot of areas of improvement that they could focus on. For instance, the communication was terrible. I was located in university housing at the time that the coronavirus pandemic really started to affect our university. And with very poor and little communication and very little resources offered to me, I was basically told that I had a few days notice to figure out how I'm going to get myself out of the dorms because they're shutting down due to coronavirus. And I think that was an opportunity that was handled very poorly and could have been handled a lot better. Additionally, I believe that revamping the testing system is going to be really important. I mean, even going down to the basics of the name, nobody wants to be under a surveillance testing program. The word surveillance has such a negative connotation to it and can lead to student hesitations in getting involved in basically being under that program. So even something as simple as that. And then even, for instance, upon the return of students to campus, there was a very poor protocol in place in terms of allowing students to move in without any prior testing and different situations like that. I think are all areas where there's a lot of area and room to grow in terms of the university's response to COVID. Additionally, for instance, with the testing protocol and the surveillance testing, I sit on the alcohol and other drugs task force where we've worked with different staff from the residence halls. And we were discussing different issues from how there was essentially lacking communication in the whole 2-week process and having to get the test. And if you get it off campus, where to submit it and different things like that. And as a result of that confusion, we had students that were being sent to student rights and responsibilities for missing a COVID test. Maybe they went home for a weekend and forgot to communicate that to the school. They now have to go and do a meeting with the Center for Student Rights and Responsibilities and potentially face a suspension and have to make their own case on something that could be as simple as forgetting to get a test or just not being on campus for 2 weeks.
Thank you. Would either of the candidates like to respond?
Yes, please.
Go ahead, 30 seconds.
Thank you. I appreciate my opponent emphasizing on my point of communication. Moving forward, I'm proud to say that I will work with the Vice President of Research here at SDSU. That way AS will have more of knowledge on the health side of how things are operating to be able to have a basis on advocating against faculty decisions and within the University Senate. Thank you.
All right. Caitlin, I think now we will go to participant questions.
So one of the questions we got was from Darren Wilson. So traditionally, graduate students have been severely underutilized in the SDSU student voice. What is your plan on incorporating graduate students into student life? We'll start with Cole.
I think one way that we can work on incorporating graduate students is the fact that on my slate, we have a student. So our vice president for finance or financial affairs is Abby Tamayo. and she is a graduate student. So not only being able to offer them the position of the current existing AS structures, such as the Graduate Student Association president, we'll have them in the office as an executive officer for the vice president of financial affairs. So being able to have her in the office and being able to communicate from her own point of view and also the point of view of other graduate students that she knows and is able to reach out to is how we can expand and build upon basically the wants and needs of graduate students and make sure that not only are their needs being met, but their voices also being heard and accounted for in all of the decisions that we're making.
Okay, thank you, Cole. Karina?
Thank you. Well, my president, Ashley Tejada, will be a grad student, which makes her the most qualified student to represent our campus because she has both the undergraduate and graduate experience. And within her 4 years in AS, she has been able to bring a lot of the perspective and understand where gaps are being made within AS, and is something that we can collaborate on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would either of you like to respond to each other on that question? Okay, Caitlin, do you want to go back and forth from your chat and my chat for questions from the audience? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay. This question is also from Darren. It says, if you haven't been involved in cultural organizations, why is that? How can cultural community members trust that now you will incorporate them in your student advocacy? Karina, if you'd like to start.
Thank you for the question. I, as a woman of color, really use my identity to push myself to inspire others, as well as push myself to take on more on this university. The Latinx Student Union is new to our campus, and in this experience, I've been able to introduce myself and to be able to collaborate with other students who identify similar as me, and to be able to share our experiences here at SDSU. I've also worked with the Aztecs Rock Hunger program and sit on the USFC Greek Council as a Panhellenic exec member. And I'm able to interact with these cultural communities and be able to learn what they are doing in their communities as well, and be able to share that information to the Panhellenic Executive Board as well as the rest of the community. Doing this in my role, I am able to see the issues that they are facing and make sure that I'm able to collaborate with them and ensure that I'm helping them in the best way I can. Furthermore, in my role as a Panhellenic Executive Officer, I've collaborated with the Black Resource Center in this past month to make sure that there is intentionality through this programming and not just trying to check off a box, but making sure that we are educating our members and we are collaborating through a very intentional way. And I hope to do that even more throughout my term on this executive board with the rest of the cultural centers and resource centers for every month. Thank you.
Thank you, Cole.
Yeah, so adding on to my experience as the Interfraternity Council Secretary, during my time on the Interfraternity Council, I was able to create a communication platform between all 4 Greek councils, so including USFC and MPHC, which are cultural Greek organizations. So being able to incorporate their view on not only cultural issues, but also cultural Greek issues. And also coming back in the fall, basically when I am beginning my year-long mental health campaign, I'm going to be building a committee with representatives from all over campus. And so I plan on doing this within the first month of returning to campus in the fall. And in doing that, I plan on making sure that I have representation from all over campus. So not only are we just doing what we think is best, but that we actually have voices in the room and at that table from every identity and cultural center. So ensuring that basically they're able to directly communicate and advocate to us what their wants and needs are for their communities. So having them in the room and at that table is how we're going to be able to make sure that we can hear those wants and needs. And then additionally on our slate, we have 2 non-Greek and cultural people. And so basically with that, having those individuals on the slate allows us to also be able to get their opinions and be able to hear kind of their views and different voices that they've heard through kind of their ladder and different people that they know.
Okay, thank you. Would either of you like to respond to each other?
Yes, please.
Okay, go ahead.
I would say that it's more important to expand that cultural community. It's more important to say that we also expand towards cultural communities that are not Greek, The new PETA Center is being introduced. The attacks on the Jewish community recently, we want to make sure the attacks on the Asian American community and the Black community, we want to make sure that we're bringing in voices from all of these communities on campus and bringing them into the conversation. And I would say that my slate has all of these representations, and they're not here because of their identity, but we're here because they have the passion and the drive and the identity to understand how they can contribute to our campus. And we need to go to these communities as well and not just wait for them to come to us. We need to make sure that we are proactively going and talking to them and seeing what their needs are and how we can best support them. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Can I add on to that? I would just like to add that, as I mentioned, within the first month of being back, I plan on going out and personally reaching out to all of them. So not expecting them to come to me to find a seat at the table, but for me personally going out and reaching out to all of these individual centers to make sure and ensuring them that they have a seat at the table. So not expecting them to come to me, but going out to them. And then additionally, with that being said, I agree, it is important to go beyond the Greek, but it also is important to not ignore them. So it would only be a fair and equitable process if we ensure that every single individual and community has a seat at this table.
All right, thank you.
Okay, great. So the next question that we have from participants is, do you have any initiatives that address social justice and sustainability on campus? We will go ahead and start with Cole.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, not a problem. Do you have any initiatives that address social justice and sustainability on campus?
Yeah, so currently I have experience addressing sustainability through the ARC expansion. And so the ARC expansion is currently a project that is going to be, once completed, a double LEED Platinum certified building, which makes it our second double LEED Platinum certified building. The second one being the Aztec Student Union. So through that, gaining experience in what sustainability looks like and how to incorporate it into the projects that we're continuing on. And then having the experience from that ARC expansion and being able to basically take my experience from sitting in these design meetings and speaking with the architects about what sustainability looks like and how to incorporate that into everything from, with a double LEED Platinum certified building, it comes out of the materials that everything's being built with and different things like that, and ensuring that I can carry that over to the Mission Valley campus. And so there was a lot of promises that were made in the Mission Valley expansion plan to meet certain sustainability goals. So making sure that we are holding them accountable to those goals throughout the completion of the Mission Valley project.
Okay, thank you, Cole.
And then I would just like to add on to that, that environmental justice is social justice.
Yeah, thank you, Cole. Karina, your response?
Thank you so much. So I would say as far as sustainability goes, there's a climate action plan passed last year within Associated Students. And I also plan to collaborate with Green Love, the Office of Sustainability student interns, as well as the University Senate Sustainability community reps to promote sustainable initiatives throughout our campus. And I've already been working through sustainable initiatives such as a subcommittee of our campus community commission, where I am currently a representative. We have a Good Neighbor program where over the past years, we've been going into the college community and making sure that we're picking up our neighborhood so that it is clean, and we're really actively promoting sustainable efforts. Sorry, I muted myself. We're actively promoting sustainable efforts in our community at a smaller scale, but also bringing in an educational standpoint to this activity where we are having our members educated on how to be more sustainable. Furthermore, as far as social justice, we need to go outside of AS facilities and make sure that we are collaborating with each of these resource centers, going into these cultural communities, make sure that we are listening to them, what their concerns are. Thank you.
Thank you. Would either of you like to respond to one another on the topic? Okay.
I do not have any new questions in my chat.
Okay, I have a couple. I'll move forward. Let's see. Okay, so what will you prioritize? Student health and safety or student socializing? That's one of the questions. Karina, we'll start with you.
I will for sure prioritize health and safety. And it is important that we are also making room for our social life through a safe way. One way I plan on doing this is through athletics. I think athletics really is a big part of our campus culture and is something that really brings us all together. I know so many students look forward to coming to SDSU because of the vibrancy that athletics gives. So one way I'm planning on doing this is making sure that all of our athletic events, including homecoming, which is one of our biggest events of the year, is in a hybrid format so that we are making sure that students who do not feel comfortable coming back to campus yet are still able to participate and feel included in our community, as well as making sure that there are an option for students who are coming back. I know the football games will be held in Carson, LA, so making sure that they are we are finding any fees, allocating any fees within AS and working with my Vice President of Finance, Austin, to make sure that we can fund students so that they are able to participate and go up to these games while not having to pay for them themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Cole, your response?
Do you mind repeating the question one more time?
Yeah. What will you prioritize, student health and safety or student socializing?
I will prioritize the student health and safety. It is obviously important that the student physical health and safety is our #1 priority, including mental health. And although there is a need for connection, social interaction, and community building, it is important that we're not sacrificing student health and putting that at risk in order to achieve that. And so with that being said, although in-person and social events are a priority of mine, it is my priority to work with administration and the San Diego County Health of Human Services to ensure that in pushing for those social events, that we're doing it in the safest way possible and in no way putting student health at risk.
Great, thank you. Would either of you like to respond to each other about the topic?
Yes, please. I would just like to say that social interactions and community building is mental health. I think part of the reason why mental health has become such a big issue over the past years because we've been disconnected, living at home, myself included. This has been a huge factor in our mental health, which is why it's so important that we are creating a community and opportunities for students to connect with each other, but making sure that we are following CDC guidelines within events to create these student events in the most safe way possible. But by ignoring student wishes is completely being able to hinder their college experience from one another, and it can become a very toxic mentality, but it is important to make sure that we are doing this in a safe way. Thank you.
Thank you. Cole, would you like to respond?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple areas that I wanted to add on to this. And so one of which is I already have pre-existing experience working with San Diego County Health and Human Services, as well as the administration, in projects such as the ARC indoors and outdoors, which are currently 2 facilities. One is open, one is not. The indoors is currently closed due to the fact that we're in purple tier and not red tier. However, with us moving back to red tier, we'll be looking to reopen the indoor portion shortly. But with the outdoors, being able to run that and have the hands-on experience of working with Mark, the director of Aztec Recreation, has given me experience of what those safety protocols look like and how to put those in place to ensure that we're being able to do this in a safe manner. We've had 0 COVID incidents tied to the outdoor Aztec Recreation, and different basically safety measures that have all been in place have been how we've been able to achieve that. The fact that we've had over 800 weekly reservations for the ARC outdoors workouts, and we've had not a single COVID case tied back to that, speaks to how when you take the right precautions and you work and make sure that you're working within the COVID guidelines that San Diego County provides, that this can all be done in a safe manner.
Okay, thank you. I got sent a couple questions, so I'm going to read one of them. From a participant, there are many communities that are underrepresented at SDSU, one being the Middle Eastern community. What steps will the candidates take to advocate for the creation of a Middle Eastern Resource Center so that our underserved students will have better access to academic success and wellness? I don't remember who started on the last question, I'm sorry. Did Karina go first? So we'll start with Cole this time.
Yeah, so actually we just did, or sorry, my slate rather, including myself, just did a walk around to a Middle Eastern RSO. And so through that, we just spoke directly with them and kind of looking at what that different representation would look like for them and what their wants and needs would be. And so making sure that we're continuing that effort to go to them and meet them in their spaces to ensure that we can hear their wants and needs and carry that out. And also ensuring that, as you mentioned, there are current cultural and identity centers on campus. However, there's a countless amount of cultures. And so making sure that we can go on, and as we've been doing throughout the years throughout the time that I've spent at SUSU, we've been adding on more and more cultural and identity centers and making sure that we can continue that and building that safe space where students feel like they're at home and can open up to other students, that we continue building those for as many cultures as we can.
Thank you. Karina?
Thank you. Well, I'd like to begin by saying that there's no one identity that makes up what it means to be an SDSU student. I think it's the different identities and walks of life that make the SDSU community what it is. With that being said, we want to make sure that we are as inclusive as possible in these accommodations and resources we are providing for our students. So I plan on working with the Director of Resources, Jessica Nair, to make sure that we are prioritizing equity, diversity, and inclusion through our AS facilities and making sure that we are providing a recreation for all. Thank you.
Would either of you like to respond to each other? Okay. Caitlin, I have one more question in my chat. Do you have any more?
I have one more. I think we have time for both, so I'll go ahead. Let's see. One of the students describes their experience struggling through COVID-19 with depression. And they're asking how you would provide specific examples of how you will expand mental health services here at SDSU to ensure students like them get care. And additionally, how will you secure us additional funding in terms of mental health? Who went first last time?
Cole went first last time, so Karina should start.
Okay, Karina, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I'd first like to begin by saying that I do think this past year, especially with COVID, has been a really difficult time for many people, including students have been really doing their education through a virtual environment, myself included. I've personally struggled with mental health, and this is why it's something that I've become really passionate about and I want to work through in my role as Executive Vice President and ensuring that we are really providing these resources for students. So one of these things that I think would really help students moving forward would be the CARES network, which I spoke about earlier today, but this is a new way for students to really get the additional help they would need through others really looking out for them and saying, how can we help you by referring students to this CARES Act, submitting a referral, submitting their concerns about their friends and other students to really make sure that we're advocating for their well-being, whether it be academic, personal, emotional. Through this CARES network, it's really a big umbrella of resources that students have, but part of this team is counseling and psychological services, where we'd really make sure to provide more resources and provide intentional programming to make sure that they're not only accessible, but make sure that students are aware about them and not just waiting for students to come back to us and say, like, I need help, where are these resources, but making sure that we are actively giving students the resources they need, because we do understand this time has been really hard and a lot of people have been struggling for mental health. Thank you.
Thank you. Your response, Cole?
Yeah, so for students struggling with depression, depression can come from many different areas. It could be anything from academic stress to personal stress to maybe they have some kind of incidents that they're dealing with in their home life and different things like that. And so it's important to ensure that we're able to offer these students resources through counseling and psychological services in which they can speak with a therapist or a counselor, go to different group sessions, go to services like Talk It Out. But I think it's also important that in this role, we go beyond counseling and psychological services. For a lot of students, mental health resources go beyond just therapy. For a lot of students, they get support and can get pulled out of depression and different issues like this by having that support from their communities and people who they consider to be their family. And so being able to continue building these communities in which they feel at home and they feel comfortable going out and socializing with other students and opening up to them is just one more avenue of where we can provide resources for students to be able to go out and kind of socialize and kind of work on tackling these different issues and things like that. So I think it's really important to emphasize not only the resources that are offered through counseling and psychological services, but also the benefits that they can receive in regards to mental health when it comes to finding their community and building those communities at San Diego State.
Okay, thank you. Would either of you like to respond to each other on that topic?
Yes, please. I'd like to elaborate on what I was saying previously. Thank you. So my opponent continued to speak about counseling and psychological services and going beyond that, but that is a part of the CARES program. It was actually introduced to AS Board of Directors yesterday. So I want to continue moving forward and work with that to try to find a differentiated approach for students to have accessibility to it. CARES is a future of our mental health program here at SDSU. It's elaborating as we speak. So I think this is a great resource for students. And next year will actually be when it will be open for students. So.
Thank you. Cole, would you like to respond? Okay. So fortunately, we're running out of time. So let's move into closing statements. Cole, you can go ahead and start.
All right. As your executive vice president, I am dedicated to revolutionizing the way that mental health is addressed at SDSU. I will work to make mental health resources more inclusive to all students from various cultures and communities, and begin to close the existing equity gaps among current resources. As someone who is uplifted by my communities during struggles with mental health, I deeply believe in the importance of building community. I recognize the disconnect between these communities, and through collaboration, I will help bring them together to create a shared experience among all students. And that is why, as your chief operating officer, I will pursue in-person events, create a more holistic homecoming, and connect with various cultural communities and identity centers within the first month of the fall semester to create a year-long campaign on mental health. I will ensure that not only do students have a seat at the table, but their voices are heard at the table. True change doesn't happen overnight. It starts with hope and becomes a reality when we work together as a collective. I am Cole Wallenstein, and I am running to be your next executive vice president.
Thank you, Cole. Karina, your closing statements.
Thank you. I'd like to begin again by thanking the Daily Aztec for hosting this event today. I'd like to also thank everyone for tuning in today, and as well as my opponent for being here. In my role as Executive Vice President, I really want to ensure further accessibility to mental health resources. I want to re-invoke pride within athletics and efforts to create a tighter-knit SDSU community. And finally, I want to restructure the culture behind AS Leader programming and training to ensure that members serve SDSU community to the fullest extent. For my involvement both within AS and across campus, I have truly gained a holistic view of campus life and am able to understand the needs of students, which I'm able to bring back into the role of Executive Vice President. My name is Karina Esteban, and I'm running to be your AS Executive Vice President. Thank you.
Okay, thank you again to all the candidates and all the students and attendees tonight. Voting for all AS positions will open March 22nd, and don't forget to tune in tomorrow at 6:30 at the Zoom link in our Instagram for the presidential debates and the final debate of this year. Thank you again to everyone.